Good morning. Today is May 17th, and I'm here with Senator Richard Black. Senator Richard Black, what do you have for us today?
Good morning, Morgan. Thank you for being here. And I wanted to lead off. We're coming up on Memorial Day, and so I just wanted to mention. First of all, uh, I was the I guess the main speaker at the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. This is the day that is celebrated by Vietnamese Americans, and we have over 2 million Vietnamese Americans in the country. People who fled from the communists when the country fell to the north, and they're intensely loyal Americans, wonderful citizens, and anyway, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I saw in my notes 22 years ago I was doing something similar, and now here it is, the 50th anniversary. But anyway, I have great respect for the South Vietnamese who fought and attempted to defend their country for many years against the North, and it was only because of just phenomenally inept leadership under President Lyndon Johnson and his Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, who has to be the most incompetent Secretary of Defense in all of American history, and that was the only reason that we lost the Vietnam War. Anyway, I don't know whether you can see, but I guess this shows. These are pictures of my radio men who were killed fighting with me. Corporal Henry Smith here. He was my chief radio man for quite a number of months, and then Dennis Wargo, who was on his first patrol. He was a new guy, and he died on the very first patrol. And we were attacking enemy positions across the Hoi An River, and they had surrounded a marine and were going to rescue the outpost. And our rubber boat, we landed up on the left flank and attacked. And anyway, during the attack, I was wounded, along with another number of other people. And both of my radio men were killed right behind me. So anyway, tip of the hat to all of the Marines from Fox Company 1st Marine Division, and also to the entire 1st Marine Division that was in an epic struggle with the 2nd North Vietnamese Division, and a battle that we started. The company I was in triggered the entire battle, and it went on for months, and eventually there were 900 Marines killed, and there were 7 who won the Medal of Honor. One of our company people won the first Medal of Honor, and then in all there were 7, and all of them posthumously awarded. So anyway, so Memorial Day, unlike Veterans Day, Memorial Day is when we remember those who have died in the country, and so this was my war, and I highlight that, but there are certainly others too. Vietnam was the last time we fought a bloody war, much more intense than the more recent wars, and I worry that we have gradually lost the memory of what a real war is, and that's why, as you know, when we've been on the show before, we've talked about being a little more sober-minded when people just frivolously throw out the idea that we're going to go to war with China, a country that is 30 times bigger, 30 times more populous than Vietnam, and has incredibly more advantages. So anyway, whatever we think of the wars, we certainly honor the people who served and fought and sacrificed. I'm still in touch with the daughter of Lori of Jim. He was a lieutenant in Fox Company, First Marines with me, and he and I used to plan operations together. And back in '67, he was killed in an incredibly bloody battle that we fought that kicked off the entire campaign in the Quezon Valley. And I actually recovered his body the day after he was killed, and I have been in touch with his daughter, who never knew anything about him. And I somehow I ran across a little posting she'd made in something, and I very carefully, I said, I'm not sure whether this is the man that you're talking about. And in fact, we explored, and it was Jim Shelton. Wonderful guy, had 6 children, and he, wonderful commander, died in battle very heroically. So anyway, we remember all of these folks back then, and we hope that there are fewer to memorialize as time goes on. So with that, oh, and let's see, did you have the picture of the 50th anniversary there, or did you just show it while I was babbling on?
At the very beginning, we showed it.
Yeah, okay.
We'll pull it back up.
Okay, good. I apologize. I'm so consumed by what I'm thinking here that I'm not watching the.
No, it's fine. And I'm glad that we spoke about this. This is important to, draw back to, I guess, you and I had spoke off the screen last time when we spoke about China, and the posturing of going over with China is that it's so detached from my generation, but in reality, it's, it's not. We still get stories. You are engaging with this young woman and telling her about her father that she never got to know. And, so it's very important to keep it grounded in that, how it trickles throughout generations, the costs of war and the true sacrifice people make. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Morgan. And with that, we're going to get into our major topic this morning, which is that President Trump has done what he could do to make the best of the Syrian debacle. The Central Intelligence Agency finally managed to overthrow the relatively free government of Syria. This happened December the 8th, 2024. President Biden green-lighted the final effort to work with several countries together to overthrow the government and to install a new president, President al-Shara. Now, President al-Shara is a very interesting guy. He led al-Qaeda in Syria. Now, for some of our watchers who may not be quite as attuned to the history, on 9/11, back in 2001, there were 13 hijackers who hijacked several passenger jets, and they flew 2 of them into the Twin Towers and brought down the Twin Towers. And it was an enormous attack. 3,000 Americans died that day, more Americans than were ever killed within the country in any war we've fought, except for the Civil War. And in any event, these were people who were all from Saudi Arabia. The hijackers were all from Saudi Arabia or from other very radical Islamic places. Most of them were Saudi Arabian. We never took any action against Saudi Arabia, but we began to attack a variety of other countries, all of which were very resistant to terrorism. So we, in a response to terrorism under George Bush and then Barack Obama and then Biden, we have just waged an absolutely brutal, vicious war against the most anti-terrorist countries in the Middle East, which is kind of an interesting twist that we used terrorism committed by our ally, Saudi Arabia, as a way to go after terrorism by destroying the anti-terrorist countries in the Middle East. This whole Middle East war that we have fought is a very dark chapter in America's history, as dark as any we've fought. But in any event, this President al-Shara met with President Trump, and President Trump tried to pull the United States out of Syria, out of the war against the Syrian government, and he tried 3 times. And the first administration he put in place, he was forced into having a number of people that he put in place who were simply insubordinate, and they simply refused to carry out his orders to withdraw troops from Syria. Probably the worst of all of them was John Bolton, his national security advisor, who, after the president announced the withdrawal of all forces from Syria, went to the Middle East and publicly announced that we were not leaving, we were not pulling troops out of Syria, just a total act of insubordination. At the same time, in the Department of Defense, General James Mattis, he was the Secretary of Defense, a odd fellow. Anyway, in order to break the chain of command so that orders couldn't be given effectively by the president, he resigned and left some chaos in the Department of Defense so that the president's orders would not be carried out. We had Mike Pompeo, who had been at the Central Intelligence Agency and then was at the Department of State, not a particularly loyal fellow, but someone who was intensely loyal to the deep state and to the global war makers. And anyway, they kept President Trump from pulling out of Syria and continued this war on Syria that had been begun long before. Well, in any event, so finally, just before Biden left office, they green-lighted the final overthrow of the Syrian government. And December the 8th, 2024, the hands of government, the hands of power were taken over by President al-Shara. He took over this radical new government in Syria. Now, to hear what the mainstream media said, you would think that suddenly tyranny was over and roses and love and affection were all the rule of the day. But here's the fact. This President al-Shara, who is now in charge of Syria, was the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria. Just 10 years after the Twin Towers and the Pentagon were attacked on 9/11, just 10 years after, he swore allegiance to Al-Qaeda, the group that had brought down the Twin Towers, and he set in motion a huge uprising against the Syrian government. And he was known for immense brutality. The CIA coordinated with the Syrian Islamists, and they began funneling terrorists from over 100 different countries. And what was happening, there was a tremendous draw for rapists and pedophiles to go into battle with Al-Qaeda. Now, the incentive for them was that under primitive 7th century Islamic law, a man who captured a woman or a little girl in battle owned her. And it says in the Quran, you will possess who you seize with your strong right arm. And so under this original early Islamic law, you could rape a little girl. Technically, she had to be 7 or 8 years old before you could do it. But in fact, there were really no limits. And so there was an immense campaign of rape. This was not like the occasional rapes that you have as incidents of war and just the disorder. This was something that was a part of the Islamic philosophy of Al-Qaeda under this new president, al-Shara. And the rapes were so massive. I recall early in the war, there were many Christian women who were often the targets of the Al-Qaeda. It was called al-Nusra in Syria, but it was Al-Qaeda. And there were many Christian women who, when the enemy attacked, would commit suicide rather than be gang raped or taken captive and become sex slaves to the Islamists. So this was the type of military operation that was run by the new president al-Shara. Now, let me say that when he first took over and established Al-Qaeda in Syria, his name was Mohammed al-Jalani. When he overthrew the government many years later, after 13 years of unremitting warfare supported by the United States, this Mohammed al-Jalani, founder of Al-Qaeda, took off his uniform, put on a business suit, slicked down his hair, and changed his name. Literally, at the very time that he took over the country, he became a new person because he really didn't want people Googling Mohammed al-Jalani and finding out all of the background. The United States was in this very awkward position where somewhere I should have sent you, I actually have a screenshot because I knew it would be taken down. Screenshot of the FBI notice that
the kind of the to the tune of I think was it $10 million. It wasn't, he wasn't a man that they were wanting to get away. They wanted people to find him. So I thought that was very interesting as well. I wish I added that. I'm sorry.
You're absolutely right, Morgan. He had a $10 million bounty on him. Literally, when he took office as the new president, that notice was still up there. The U.S. Treasury Department had a similar notice. And both of them identified him as with his strong involvement with Al Qaeda. So, anyway, Joe Biden, and of course, who knows whether he, was under nursing care at this time. The guy is so feeble, but he, his administration at least decided we're going to throw a hot potato to President Trump. And what we're going to do is we're going to, by then we had so weakened them by blockading them, devaluing their currency. We created famine by seizing their wheat fields and their oil. And we just starved the country to death. It was a very brutal operation of the State Department, Central Intelligence Agency. And finally, the army just collapsed. And the CIA, of course, was, they had their fangs gleaming. Oh, look what we've done. We've put in power this Al Qaeda despicable operation. Now, this one other thing that this new president was responsible for. They, like the original Islamists who swept across the world, they believed in beheading everybody who was not a radical Muslim. And so under his leadership, Al Qaeda in Syria has beheaded literally thousands of helpless captives, many of them, prisoners of war, just taken out. And I have watched, there were several incidents where they would capture a large group of Syrian men and officers and then just line them up and just go down the line and behead every single one. And so he is responsible for the beheading of thousands and thousands of people. Some crucifixions they carried out. There were times where they actually conducted slave markets. And the people who capture the women and the girls, not only can they do what they want with them, these are slaves. These are utter and complete total slaves. And they can sell them. They can buy and sell slaves. So when they took over, and of course now Mohammed al-Jilani slicks down his hair, becomes Mr. al-Shara, the president, and their prime minister declared vengeance against the old regime. Well, it's like declaring vengeance against the government of the United States when we change government. So they went out. They began to hunt down the Alawites. Now, the mainstream media is always saying, "Okay, the Alawites, these are just people associated with this tyrant Assad." Well, Assad was not a tyrant, but that's another story. But the Alawites are widely known throughout Syria as the friends of the Christians, because they are more modern people. They are not, they believe in women's rights just like the Christians do. And under President Assad had the most advanced constitution in the Middle East. I couldn't just offhand point to another country in the Middle East that had a constitution. I presume there must be some other one, but he had an admirable constitution that guaranteed religious freedom in 3 locations. I read it. I read the Constitution. It guaranteed women's rights, and it not only guaranteed equal rights for women, but it was aspirational in nature, to where it recognized that we're not where we want to be, and we are going to, we're going to work to to raise up the rights of women. It guaranteed free speech and freedom of press. Now, obviously, in a struggle for survival, you can't have as much free speech or free press as otherwise. But in any event, one of the first things that happened when this new president of Syria took over is to get rid of the Constitution, because they're not going to have women's rights. The heck with that. They're not going to have freedom of speech or the press, and they're certainly not going to have freedom of religion, because their religion says to just kill people who refuse to convert to Islam. So they went out and they started hunting down the Alawites, the Friends of the Christians, and they began slaughtering them. They've slaughtered thousands of them. And they will take over an Alawite home, and they just go in and they say, okay, you got 15 minutes to get out of here. We own your house now. And that's happening all over the place, where they're just throwing people out on the streets. Those are the lucky ones. Those are the ones who are not being executed summarily. They've gone to war with the Kurds, who the United States were supporting. They've gone to war with the Druze, another religious minority. And they, very sadly, they've kidnapped 40 Alawite women that we know of. And of course, they just become the sex slaves. So one day they're the wife of some young fellow, and the next they're just the concubine for some revolting Islamist rapist. And the same thing with little girls. I don't have any information. There's very little information that can get out of Syria now, but to these very fundamentalist Islamists, there is no difference between a 9-year-old girl and a 25-year-old woman. They're all free game. So I'm not sure of the ages of those 40 that were taken, and I'm sure that's just a little sample of what's going on. They have taken many thousands of women as slaves. So the whole nation is in terror, and meanwhile, the mainstream media is declaring victory over tyranny in Syria. Now we've got rid of this tyrant Assad, and there's a claim that he owned some sports cars. Nobody has a clue. Those happen to be in the great big presidential palace, which is like the seat of government. It's not like his house. It's the seat of government. But so they don't have a clue, but it's just the propaganda. The way that the mainstream media does this, they create hatred towards these people. Then they find it more easy to topple them and to install these loathsome governments. While they're like the magician who says, okay, watch what's in my hand, and meanwhile they're doing something over here. But just watch my hand. And watch my hand with the mainstream media is, here, I'm going to tell you that Assad had a sports car. Now, they don't have a clue who owned the sports car, but they found it somewhere in the executive branch of the government. So it's got to be his. Well, watch this. And meanwhile, they're installing literally the same government that attacked the Twin Towers on 9/11 in one of the most traumatic events that's ever happened in American history. But this is the way the CIA works. It's the way the mainstream media globally operates. But in any event, Trump is boxed in. What does he do? Typical Trump, he tries to make lemonade out of lemons, and he's doing what he can do. So he said, okay, we're going to lift the sanctions, and we want you to sign on to the Abraham Accords. And of course, you know, almost everything that goes on these days is to enhance the power of Israel, expand its borders, exterminate the Palestinian people. And so the idea of using Syria to provide some diplomatic cover for Saudi Arabia, the U.S. for a long time has wanted countries to give formal recognition to Israel and kind of accept their dominance over what, you know, was originally populated by the indigenous Palestinian people who had lived there from time immemorial. As well, you know, there were a number of Jews, good Jewish population, good Christian population, and now the indigenous Palestinians, the indigenous Christians, and the indigenous Jews. All but the Jews have been eliminated. The population of Christians that used to be, I don't know what, it was probably 25% of present day Israel. They're down to 1% of the population. So they've been purged, and as well as the Muslims who are now being gradually exterminated in Gaza, and they're beginning to do similar operations in the West Bank to exterminate the population there. So anyway, it is a total mess. I certainly agree with President Trump that this whole mess would never have happened had he been in a position from the outset to control what happened. But at this point, I'd say with Syria, the one thing is I do agree with lifting the sanctions, because we've been starving the entire population of a nation for 13 years. The reason we have troops unlawfully occupying sovereign Syrian territory is so that we could seize their wheat fields and their oil, and that way we could starve the population, because the wheat fields up in the north where the US troops are feed the entire country. So we were able to cut off their food supplies, and they use their oil to get a little bit of export revenue. We stole the oil, and so it's the whole thing is an abortion. But
yes, and I think it's important to say, I know that there was a report that the Syrian government was basically calling the American government pirates for, you know, taking that third of the country and basically making a stranglehold and owning those assets, and not, you know, that are Syrian assets, and not giving them back to the people. And that brings me up to, I guess maybe we can divert a little bit. I wanted to you touch upon it, the, you know, the neoconservative ideology, as well as this land grab that we had in Syria that was never voted on Congress. You know, we kind of, it just happened through, I guess, the Patriot Act, allowing the president to make these unilateral decisions, to make these engagements. But there's this woman who served in the Biden administration. Her name is Dana Stroul. She served as the Deputy Assistant to the Department of Defense, or Secretary of Defense, excuse me. And there's this video of her in 2019 basically boasting about this power. And to kind of like the untrained ear, you hear that and you don't really grasp what she's saying. So I want to play this video real quick and kind of get your take on what she has just said.
Still had compelling forms of leverage on the table to shape an outcome that was more conducive and protective of U.S. interests. And we identified 4. So the first one was the 1/3 of Syrian territory that was owned via the U.S. military with its local partner, the Syrian Democratic Forces. Now, this was a light footprint on the U.S. military, only about 1,000 troops over the course of the Syria Study Group's report, and then the tens of thousands of forces, both Kurdish and Arab, under the Syrian Democratic Forces. And that 1/3 of Syria is the resource-rich, it's the economic powerhouse of Syria. So where the hydrocarbons are, which obviously is very much in the public debate here in Washington these days, as well as the agricultural powerhouse. But we argued that it wasn't just about this 1/3 of Syrian territory that the U.S. military and our military presence owned, both to fight ISIS and also as leverage for affecting the overall political process for the broader Syrian conflict. There were three other areas of leverage. One is political and diplomatic isolation of the Assad regime, so holding the line on diplomatic isolation, preventing embassies from going back into Damascus. Two is the economic sanctions architecture. So some of this is part of the maximum pressure campaign of the Trump administration on Iran, but there's a whole suite of both executive and congressional sanctions on Syria and Bashar al-Assad, both for human rights abuses in Syria and to the backers of Assad for their activities in support of him in Syria. And three was reconstruction aid. So the United States remains the overall largest single donor of humanitarian aid to Syrians both inside Syria and refugees outside of Syria. And there was some stabilization assistance in the part of Syria that was liberated from ISIS and controlled via the Syrian Democratic Forces in northern eastern Syria. The rest of Syria, though, is rubble. And what the Russians want and what Assad wants is economic reconstruction. And that is something that the United States can basically hold a card on via the international financial institutions and our cooperation with the Europeans. So we argued that absent behavioral changes by the Assad regime, we should hold the line on preventing reconstruction aid and technical expertise from going back into Syria.
I mean, it's just out in the open, you know, and
Sure. That's a pretty good summary of what it was. We invaded Syria. We occupied with American troops. We fought in Syria, fought against the Syrian government forces, and we seized control. Now, it's a funny thing, you know, when you compare with what the Russians have done in Ukraine, you know, they have a lot of justifications right on their border. We're on the other side of the world, and we're always saying, well, oh, you know, the sacred sovereign borders of Ukraine, and what an outrage that the Russians would go across there. Well,
very valid point.
We go in without the slightest legal justification and seize countries one after the other. And the seizure that took place, this was right after the Assad government had conducted very widespread, very fair presidential elections in which he was reelected. They were very lawful, and there was such an outpouring of support for Assad that you would not believe the photos of the cities in Syria, where there were they looked like rivers of humanity, everybody coming out and just in ecstasy that they had reelected President Assad, and they had shown the will of the Syrian people to be free. And John Kerry, who was the Secretary of State at the time, came in. He flew into an adjacent country and got off the plane just long enough to dismiss this enormous effort that the Syrians had done to have free and fair elections. And he said those elections are nothing. And that he was clearly angry at the Syrian people for expressing their will. And he said, I think we're going to need to go to Plan B. Plan B was what this woman was just speaking about on the video. and it was to invade Syria, to seize their breadbasket that fed the entire nation and starve them to death, and also to seize their oil. And that meant that in the winter, that people who, you had old people living in rubble, just living, where there might be a wall and maybe they'd stretched a blanket or something to live under there.
Yeah, I
And
remember there was reports that elderly people that were kind of displaced in the tents, they resorted to burning their shoes in the winter because no oil was getting to them, or they would freeze to death. So I'd seen that report, and that was kind of the direct consequence of us owning that 1/3 of land.
yes,
So I
exactly. That's a tremendous example. That people would just die of freezing and die of starvation. This was the deliberate result of what the White House was directing under Obama and under Biden, and the brutality is hard for Americans to comprehend because these things happen in darkness, and the American people never know. They just, they tune into the news, and the news says, "Oh, this bad guy Assad, we're going to do what we can about him." Well, what we can do about him is we can turn over young girls to rapists, which we did literally by millions, and and we can starve people, we can freeze elderly people to death. This is stuff that was going on, and I really hope we can get away from it. I don't trust what goes on in the CIA to this day, because I'm not sure who completely runs the CIA. It's kind of a force of its own, functions in absolute darkness and secrecy, and so in any event, I think what Trump should do is, and I don't have any problems with the idea of ending the sanctions so that just for common Syrians they can eat again. But he should demand that in exchange for that this new Al Qaeda government end their attacks on the Alawites first, because the Alawites had just been exterminated like rats, and so that would be number one. He needs to ensure protection for the Christians. Some of the Christians have been executed for hiding Alawites in their home to prevent them from being killed, and then the new Syrian government goes in and just kills everybody, kills the men, women, children, just slaughters the whole family. Same thing with the Druze, with the Kurds, with all of the religious minorities, and also we need to demand that they stop going in and just stealing people's homes and businesses and offices and so forth, and just stealing them and taking them for their own. So I think that's the best that we can get out of this. Trump has got a lot of leverage. If he demands that they stop this in exchange for the sanctions, they'll stop it because they need the food. If they can't feed their people, they'll face the same fate that President Assad did when he was still in power and there was still hope for the people. So this is, I guess we're about to the end of our time. But
Yeah, it was definitely a very intense, conversation. And so we had so much more to get into. I wish we maybe touch upon it next week. Well, to leave you with a glimmer of hope, I guess we can play the clip of Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia where he is blasting the neocon tactics that have, plagued the Southwest Asia for a very long time.
Well, that
And
will
it's
be
crucial.
I'm sorry.
that'll be a treat. So we'll show that, and that'll be our sign off. So we thank all of you for listening, and let's finish with a nice film by of Donald Trump.
Wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of truth in that. I would find enormous difficulty thinking of any country since Second World War where we have done great improvement. I guess South Korea, we certainly rescued South Korea. So there are some exceptions, but certainly going through once you had the George Bush presidency, and even if you go back to Herbert Walker Bush, and you go with this first Gulf War, which sort of set the stage for overthrowing Iraq and eventually killing 2 million innocent people. It's been nightmarish, and it's bankrupted the United States. We're in phenomenal debt, principally because of all of the wars that we've fought. And in any event, Morgan, you'll have to straighten all this out, okay?
I'll get on it. But in the meantime, that was very refreshing to hear, the leader of the country who was doing all these misdoings to kind of confront that and, say that, we were kind of wrong and that what needs to be embraced is your own cultures and instead of imposing ours. And I thought that was very refreshing. So I wanted to end on that. And with that, I will say join us next week to focus on the news. And thank you, Senator, for all you've done today.
Thank you, Morgan.